Okay, so as I said, my name is Mike. I'm an outbound product manager for ITSM and DevOps based in Melbourne. And with me today, I have some colleagues who are going to be helping out. So we have Giri, who's based in India. We have Senthil, also in India, and G2 as well from Product Success in India. And then we have Alex, who is in Sydney. So, sorry, I'm just having a look at the chat. Is there something I need to do? Oh, okay, cool. Okay, got it. All right. So we also have with us a couple of folks from one of our key partners for DevOps TM Labs, Christian and Daniel. So they will also be helping out with today's session. All right, so the agenda is we'll give a very brief intro to what DevOps Change Velocity is and some of the challenges and the problems that it addresses, and talk about our approach around DevOps. The majority of the time will be spent on the lab, so I'm hoping that we'll have over an hour to actually get through the lab, and then we'll come back about 10 minutes before the end and we'll wrap up. So the first thing you need to do, so I've put this link in the chat. If you haven't already reserved an instance to do the lab, then please do so. Click on that link and put in your name, email address, and reservation code, and then an instance will be allocated to you for this session. These instances will only be available for the next 2.5 days. So that's in case you want to try and do the lab after this session in your own time. You are welcome to do that, but just be aware that the instances are only available for a limited time. So the idea is to wake up your instance now, because it may be hibernating, so that by the time we get through this, the initial slides and kick off the lab, that your instance is actually ready to go. All right, so we'll while you're doing that, we'll just kick off with some intros. And some of you who have attended demos on DevOps before may have seen some of this information, but for those of you who haven't, we're just going to outline what our products do in terms of the value. So typically when we look at customers today that are moving to cloud and they've got development teams that are running DevOps, we do see some issues where they're trying to scale up DevOps and often they're having some challenges. So one of the challenges is there's a lack of visibility and traceability around the data. So this is really caused by developers having their own set of tools. So developers might be working in tools like Jira, Jenkins, Azure DevOps. There's a host of different tools. And from an operational point of view, the folks that are looking at the changes that are coming through from those pipelines are working in ServiceNow, and they don't have access to the data in those tools. So that can often cause a wall between developers and operations because they don't have visibility of all the data. So developers sometimes have a fully automated CI/CD pipeline. So they're building, they're testing, and they're deploying code through a fully automated pipeline. But when it comes to change management, they sometimes have to manage that manually, and that can cause wasted time and what they see as wasted effort. But obviously, we need changes to be created, and we need changes to be compliant, and we need to make sure that we're meeting all our obligations when it comes to regulatory compliance, etc. So how do we get around those sort of issues, and how do we ensure we can increase the delivery and velocity with DevOps, but all at the same time stay compliant with the change management process. So when you look across some of the personas and the roles involved, the change manager in the middle there is often hit by an increasing number of changes that they have to deal with, and obviously make sure that everyone's complying with the regulatory requirements. And how do they do that unless there's some automation which can help them? The developer, as I said, is often having to swivel from their tools into ServiceNow to put all the data into the change, and spending a lot of admin time on these sort of tasks. And from a development point of view, you often have the engineering manager looking at their team's performance and trying to get insights into how they're doing, but they don't always have visibility across the end-to-end value chain. So a lot of these roles have, these personas have some issues around how it's managed today. So what we do with DevOps Change Velocity, and the solution that you're going to see today in the lab, is we say, let developers stay in their own tool sets. So some of the tools you can see on the left there, Jira, GitHub, GitLab, Jenkins, and the tool we're going to be dealing with today, which is Azure DevOps. And we will integrate those tools into ServiceNow, and we will normalize the data that gets ingested into the platform. And that will allow us to do two really important things. Number one, on the right-hand side, it will allow us to populate the data that we get from those tools into our dashboards, the Insights dashboard, and we'll have a look at that during the lab. And that allows us to see how we're performing in terms of DevOps, and gives us some really key metrics and KPIs that we can track over time. So we're getting to see that. And the second important thing is that data can be used as inputs to our change approval policies in order to automate the change process. So once we automate the change process, we remove those barriers and we remove the manual effort required from everyone involved. And it allows us to really increase delivery, but maintain the compliance and the governance that we need for change. So we respect the systems of record. So typically, a developer might be working in tools like Jira, where the stories, features, bugs, etc., are created, and that really describes why they're doing the work. So that the user stories contain the why am I doing a change, and then the actual changes themselves are the what, which would be in their code commits, usually in a Git repo, and then the changes get built, tested, and deployed. And then obviously from a ServiceNow point of view, we have the operational system of record, but we also have all that data. So we have access to the commits, the user stories, the vulnerability scan results, the testing results from the pipeline. That's all available to us, and we can use that data to make decisions about what we want to happen with the changes in an automated way. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to run the session today. So you should have now registered to get your lab instance up and running, and be waking that up. Now, there was some pre-work that needed to be done in Azure DevOps prior to the workshop. Most of you should have received an email with the instructions for that pre-work. But if you registered late, you may not have got that in time, because it does take a couple of days for one of the parallel job requests to actually get processed by Microsoft. So what I'm going to do first, before we kick off, is just get an idea about who has actually done the pre-work. So let me just stop the slides at this point to run the poll. Oops. Okay, I'm just gonna run a poll. If you can please answer the question on the poll. So just interested in seeing how many of you have managed to complete all the pre-work for the workshop. Okay, I can see 15 responses, so we need a few more. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll in about 15 seconds, so please respond. Last chance to respond. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end the poll now. All right, so it looks like more or less about 8 people have actually finished the pre-work for those who responded, and some of you didn't have time, and there's one person who ran into issues. Okay, so thank you for that. Now, what we will do then is we will, for those of you who've done the work already, the pre-work, that's great. Thank you very much. So you will be able to go through the lab and follow it as we go through. And then for the rest of you, you won't be able to actually complete the lab now, but you will be able to do it later in your own time once you do these initial steps. So you're welcome to stay and to follow what we go through so that you understand how it works. And then you've got the lab guide, you'll have access to the instance. And once you've set up your ADO project, you'll be able to then continue and do the lab in your own time. So the lab today is really this second bit here. So what we're going to do in the lab for the next hour or so is we're going to connect the Azure DevOps tool to our ServiceNow instance and get that integration working. And then we're going to create a DevOps application, and we'll associate the plan, the code repos, and the pipelines to the app. And then we're going to run the pipeline and have a look at the data that we start seeing in ServiceNow. And then finally, we will modify the pipeline to automate a change request. Okay, so given we've only got less than 10 people, I'm just thinking, I think what we'll do is we won't create breakout rooms team. We'll just run this as a single session. If anyone runs into problems or you get stuck along the way, please raise your hand or post in the chat, and one of the ServiceNow folks on the call, or the TM Labs guys on the call, will help you and get you going. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that one. Just before we kick off, does anyone have any questions or any issues before we kick off? Has everyone got the lab guide? Got their instance? Okay, so we're going to start. Okay, so if you have a look at, if you open your lab guide, the first part of the lab guide is about that pre-work that had to be done in Azure DevOps. So that was about creating a new project and pulling in some data from a template that we have set up. So that those steps we're not going to go through. So where we're going to start, if you're following along, is we're starting on page 7 of the guide. So where it's got the heading Lab 1, DevOps Change Workspace Project Onboarding, on page 7, that's where we're starting. Okay, so the first step to connect the tools is you need to create a personal access token in ADO. So once you've logged into your ADO organization, just over here next to your name, where I'm showing my cursor, next to your name, you'll see user settings. If you click on that and then go down to personal access tokens, it will open this screen. And what you want to do is create a new access token. So you click here to create a token, give it a name and an expiry date, and just make sure that, sorry, this Zoom meeting's in the way, that you grant full access to the token and then create it. So if you were doing this for real in a production environment, obviously you have the option of defining the permissions that you actually need to all the different components in ADO. And right at the end of your lab guide, you'll see an appendix which defines the permissions that ServiceNow DevOps needs. But for the purposes of the workshop, just give it full access and then go and create it. Okay, and don't forget to copy it and save it somewhere because we'll need it later on in the lab. So once it's created, you must copy it and save it somewhere. Okay. The next step is to log into your ServiceNow instance that you have and open the DevOps Change workspace. So once you're logged into your ServiceNow instance, if you click here on Workspaces, you should see DevOps Change Workspace there. Just click on that, and then it should open the screen that you're seeing now with the workspace. Now, what the workspace is really a single one-stop shop for managing the DevOps Change product or application. And I'll just quickly orientate you around that. So you can see over here, we've got getting started, and then there's some cards here which will help you set up your accounts and your users. Now, we've already done those steps for you because your instances have been pre-configured. So these steps here have already been done. What we're going to do is we're going to do these steps here to connect the tool and create applications. So we'll go through that. And then once those steps are done, we'll be able to create the change request automation. So that is what we're going to do. Now, just to quickly show you some of the other parts of this workspace, the applications section, which I'm clicking on next, will cover the setup of DevOps applications, and we will go through that next. And just so you can see, it takes a little time to load. So just be aware, these instances are very small and they're hosted in the US. So they might be a little bit slow. They don't perform as quickly as what you might be used to on your own instance. So just be patient and allow time for the instance to load. There are some parts where it'll take some time to come back to you. So just be aware. Some of the other parts here, we've got tools. Once we connect our different tools, so once you have all your your different DevOps tools connected. This dashboard or workspace allows you to manage all those tools. And then the other one is the Insights dashboard. Now, what I'll come back to that one. And then there's an administration section. So what we'll do next is we're going to connect our tool to ADO. So for those of you who've done the pre-work, click on Connect Tools, and you should see pop up this modal. So this basically allows you to run a playbook, which is going to help us automate the connection to the tool that we need. So over here, you can see we categorize DevOps tools under planning tools, coding tools, orchestration, artifact, and software quality. So when you click on the different category, you'll see some of the tools come up where we have connectors, out-of-the-box connectors. What we're going to do is, if you click on orchestration and then select Azure DevOps, that will open up the next part of what is required to be input in terms of the data. So with ADO, you have an option of connecting either at the organization level or at the project level. So what we will do is we will connect at project level. And the next part here is asking for the URL of your Azure DevOps project. So I'm going to jump back into ADO. And the project that I'm using is this one. So if you've already created your project, the URL that you need to plug in there is this one here from your project. I'm going to copy that and paste that in there, and then give it a name. You can give it any name you want. And then click next. For the ServiceNow guys, I'm not monitoring the chat. So if you need to stop me for anything, then please let me know.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, Mike, about picking Azure DevOps from either one of those tabs, so plan, code, orchestration. So there's no difference. You can connect from any of those options. It's because Azure DevOps supports all of those capabilities, so it appears in each of the different tabs.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll quickly, thanks, Alex. That's exactly right. I'll quickly cover that. So one of the reasons why we're using ADO for this lab is just to orientate you on Azure DevOps if you've never used it before. So, ADO has a lot of the capability of some of the other tools and they're all rolled into one. So ADO has boards, which is for planning. So this boards is similar to a tool like Jira. So that's where you create your work items and have your backlogs and your sprints, etc. Your epics, features, stories would all go under boards. And you should see in your own ADO a number of work items in there already that have been copied from the template. Then we've got repos, which is obviously where the code repository where we're going to have our code. Again, that should already be populated with some files in terms of the code and the configuration data. And then ADO also includes pipelines. So if you've done the pre-work, when you click on the pipeline, you should see what I'm showing now. So your pipeline should have run already once through the build, test, and deploy steps. That's what you should see right now, is that pipeline having run through those steps once already. And then ADO also includes test plans and an artifact repository. So the reason why we are using it, as I said, is because it contains all these things where, you know, you do have other DevOps tools which will take some of these functions as separate tools. Okay, hopefully that answers the question. All right, so moving on. So the next bit is I need to plug in my credentials here. So that password access token that I created just before, I need to copy and paste that in here. So I'm just going to grab mine and paste that in, and then click connect. Now this step takes a little while, so you need to be patient and allow it to process. You will see a pop-up that flashes on and off. What is happening now is ServiceNow is connecting with that ADO instance, and it's checking the permissions assigned to that personal access token to make sure that it has all the right permissions to be able to access what it needs in order for this to work. So that is happening now, and we should see some activity. As I said, it is a little bit slow with these lab instances, so just bear with us. Okay, you can see that flashing. It will come back. If there are any other questions, guys, on ServiceNow, guys, please let me know.
So Mike, Jitu here. So while this permission check is going on, can we quickly check somewhere, take a pause? Where are other participants? Are they following us?
Yes.
Still not?
For sure. Okay, so is everyone who is actually doing the lab today, are you all up to the same step that I'm on now? Is anyone stuck or have any issues, or are you all with us? If you are stuck, please raise your hand. Okay, I can see Suranga raised a hand. Two people have raised hands. So, guys, can you please help out with the questions there? I'm just going to continue, just in the interest of time. So, what this is showing me is all these permissions for, you know, read access to the work items, read access to the code, etc. This is what ServiceNow requires in order to make the integration work, and those are all. Whoops. Those are all there. Sorry, I don't know why I did that. Just got to wait for it to come back now. Okay, so I have all the permissions I need. I'm going to continue. So we're on page 8 of the lab at the moment. Yeah, guys, if you need to create a breakout room to talk with anyone who's stuck, please go ahead and do that, and then join back to this session when you can. All right, the next part of the playbook is asking us if we want to restrict access tool access to particular users. Now, normally you might want to do that when you want to set up some groups who will have DevOps roles in your organization. So that's all possible here from the playbook. We're not going to do this step, so we're just going to skip it. As I said, usually this is much faster in a proper instance. Okay, so this step here, configure as your DevOps instance to send data. What this is going to do is we're going to set up some webhooks in ADO so that we get real-time events coming through when data is changing or when work items are created or updated, for example. So what we're going to do to make that happen is on page 9, at the top, you'll see that there is a password for the integration user that we have to provide. You can copy and paste that in here. Just make sure there are no spaces and that you copy the password correctly. And I'll just show you what that should look like. So we have pre-configured a password here. Just going to copy it. And paste that in. Okay, so what you should see is now for DevOps and the ops, the O in ops is actually a 0. So just make sure it says now for DevOps with the exclamation mark on the end. And then once that's pasted properly, click configure as your DevOps. And that is going to set up the webhooks for us in ADO. So once this playbook finishes, things should speed up a bit. Okay, now what we're doing is we're going to associate the data that we need. We're going to pull in the data that we need, that we want to track. So in terms of plans, we want to track all the plans. So just select this one, whatever you named your project. Just select it and then click next so that we're tracking all the plans. And the same for repositories. So just select, make sure Parts Unlimited is selected to track that repository and then click next. And the next will be the pipelines. Same thing. So these are the pipelines that we're going to track. So just select both Parts Unlimited and Parts Unlimited end-to-end and click next. So those are the pipelines that we want to track in ServiceNow. Okay, we're almost there. For this step, you would normally assign a service. If you have services in your CMDB, you can assign services at this point. So it's just bringing up, for example, if you had some non-prod services that you wanted to associate with the pipeline, and then you had some production ones, you're able to do that. If you had different pipeline steps for those different environments, you can do that at this point. We're just going to skip this step, but this is just to show you that that functionality is available. So we'll skip that one. And that should be the end of this playbook. Okay, so that is finished. I'm now going to click on View Tool Record to look at what we have just created. And I just want to do a quick checkpoint. Was everyone able to stay with me on that? Is everyone at the same step? Or if you have any, if you're stuck again or you've got an issue, please raise your hand. I can see a lot of action happening in the chat, so hopefully questions are getting
yes.
answered.
So till now everything looks fine, Mike. I think there were a couple of issues which we picked up and sorted out.
Okay, fantastic. All right, thanks to you too. All right, so this is the tool. This is the tool record that we just created. So that's just showing you what that looks like. Now on page 10, we want to make sure that the webhooks that we just set up are actually working in ADO. So I'm going to jump back to my ADO instance, and down the bottom, right down the bottom here, you'll see project settings. If you click on that, and then under project settings, under general, you'll see service hooks. Click on service hooks. Okay, so I can see that the webhooks have been set up. That's what you should see in your ADO instance if that is working. So you should see that whenever code is pushed, a release is created, work item created, deleted, etc., that it'll send an event to ServiceNow and let us know about those updates. So just make sure that is working in your ADO. Okay, so going back, there's a couple of ways we can navigate to the next step. Either from the home page, I can create on click applications, or from here where I ran the playbook, I can click on create a new application. They'll basically do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to go here, home, and click on create application. All right, so this will allow me to create a logical container, a DevOps app, where I can relate all the data that's applicable from my plans, my repository, my pipelines, etc., to an application. And I can either create a new one, or if I have existing application models in my CMDB, then I can use an existing one. So for the purposes of this lab, we're going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it Parts Unlimited, and click Create. Okay, and then we have the option here to associate this with a business application. I'll do that in this case. And I will click Save to save this record. And you can see on the right-hand side, I've got some recommended actions. So the workspace will give you help and also surface documentation in the tool to walk you through what you need to do next when you're on any particular part of the workspace. So you can see across here, we've got plans, repositories, pipelines. There's nothing in there at the moment. So first of all, we're going to associate some plans. So I'll click on Associate Plans first. Okay, now when this list comes up, you might need to just sort this list to be able to find your tool. You will see a whole lot of data in here, but we want to select the tool that we just created. So I'm just clicked on tool to sort the other way. So this is my tool. So I want to select that one and then associate plans. And now we're going to import data, the planning data from the tool. So what we need to do next is we can import up to 90 days of data. We just want to go back 2 months in this case. So I'm just going to change 05 May to 04 April. So we've got 2 months of data, and then click on import. So that's going to go and import the last 2 months of all that data for me. And you can see there's an import request that's been started there for the planning data. Next, we'll do the same thing for the repositories. So associate repositories, click on that one and follow the same steps. So click on tool to make sure that you're selecting the right one, depending on what you named your tool. I want to make sure I'm selecting Parts Unlimited here. And then associate repositories. And again, just go back 2 months, so 04, and import all that data. And again, there's an import request that's been triggered there. And the next one, the last one, is pipelines. So click on Associate Pipelines. Select both of these. And then associate pipelines. And same thing again, go back 2 months and import data. Okay, so you can see here the import requests have been kicked off and they've been created. Now they will run in sequence, so they'll take a little while to run. So while they're running, we'll allow that to run and finish. It take a few minutes to happen. We're going to go and have a look at what happens once all the data is imported. What does that give us in terms of insights? So I'm on a different instance here just to show you what the insights dashboard looks like. So over here, this is just a summary page. But if we dive into our flow metrics, once I've got integration with my planning tool, I'll be able to see data like this, which is all about showing me my cycle time for my planning items and how long is it taking me work to flow through from once a story gets created to when it gets deployed. So this is showing me the cycle time. So how long are my planning items, my work items staying in a particular state? What is the throughput and distribution? So for example, if I'm spending a lot of time fixing bugs rather than getting new customer features deployed, maybe I have to look at why I've got a lot of bugs to deal with. Is my code quality not where it should be? Is my testing not where it should be? So it allows me to dive in and understand any blockers, any issues, any bottlenecks I have in my process. Again, this is about how long it's taking me to deploy work overall, and then how long is work staying in a work in progress state? How long am I waiting for things to happen, and what can I do about reducing that wait time? So that data is all there. You can see there's some filters up here which are out of the box. So this is showing me all my data, but if I want to filter it, I can look at a particular application or even a particular repository, a service, business application, product, even a specific work item type if I want to. And these filter widgets are available across all these different tabs on the dashboard. The change acceleration dashboard will show me how I'm doing in terms of change management for DevOps. So what is my volume? How long is it taking for these changes to get closed out? What about the automated versus manual changes? Obviously developers are keen to automate everything. And once you start doing that in your organization, it'll create momentum for teams that are not automating their changes to want to jump on board and do it. Here you can see changes that are waiting for approval and how long that's taking. So you can dive into why that's happening. And you can even have a look at potential savings for developers. So where a developer no longer has to manually create a change and copy all the data onto their change, where that is now automated, there's a saving there, and this can track those savings for you. The Accelerate Metrics tab is another word for this, the industry word for this is the DORA metrics. So DORA stands for DevOps Research and Assessment, which was set up by Google as a kind of a benchmark or a performance measurement across the industry of how organizations are performing with DevOps. And there are 4 key DORA metrics: lead time, deployment frequency, MTTR, and failure rate. So these are tracked out of the box by this dashboard. So you're able to see how well you're doing and what you need to pay attention to in terms of your overall DevOps performance. The quality metrics cover your code quality, code coverage, your test passing rates, bug counts, and any security vulnerabilities that are getting pulled into and getting flagged by tools like SonarQube, for example, or JFrog. Your development metrics allow you to look at your developer performance. So things like your commit frequency, how many active committers do I have? Who are my top committers, top reverters? Usually those are the same people. And that all builds a picture for you in terms of your developer performance, average commits by committer, by pipeline execution, commits without work items. There's no data on this widget, but that's an important one. Obviously, you don't want to commit any code without having a story attached to it. So this will track that for you. And you might want to have a change approval policy that looks for that as well and stops any work being deployed if there's no work item attached. So we do provide for that out of the box. And lastly, operational stability. So this is the DevOps changes that are actually flowing through your system. Are they causing incidents? Are they causing outages? And what is that doing to service availability? So you can track that as well. Okay, any questions on that? And again, guys, I'll ask you to please read the questions for me because I can't see the chat.
Yeah, there is no active question as of now, Alex. We answered a couple of questions.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, just quick time check, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. No worries. Let me push on. Thanks, G2. Okay. So going back here, I'm just going to refresh this pane just to have a look at our imports. Okay. So we had 2 completed. 1 has an error. 1 is waiting. Okay. That's I'm not sure why that's got an error. But that's okay. Maybe because there's no data yet in our pipeline, I suspect. That's why that one errored. So that's okay. All right, we're going to move on to page 14 of the lab guide now. So now we're going to jump into the pipeline and start tracking it. So just to confirm what we actually imported. So before we do that, so the plan, so we can see we've got the plans now, and we've got a repository, and we've got 2 pipelines that are there. So we should be able to see, if we jump into here, we should be able to see we've got 120 work items So if you can see the work items, so again, this is the metadata that's being pulled in from ADO on all the work items that we imported. So that's what you should see now in ServiceNow, is that data. Okay. So now what we want to do, we're going to look at tracking the pipelines. So on page 14, what we need to do is go to our ADO project and go to the pipeline. So over here on the left, you'll see the little rocket, and then you click on pipelines. And click down here on Paths Unlimited, where you see that. And then up here on the top right, click on Run Pipeline. Now this will come up with a pop-up. You don't have to select anything here. We're going to commit to the master branch and we're going to run that. Okay, so that will run. And we'll let that run. So just before we move on, so G2, any other issues or questions that I need to address? Is everyone keeping up?
Yes, everything looks fine till now. A couple of folks, they stuck. I'm not sure if Krishna, if you feel okay as of now.
Were the guys able to help you folks that got stuck?
Yes, yes. Rest everything is going smooth.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, guys, raise your hand if you have a question, if you stuck somewhere.
Okay,
Good.
so
Carry on, Mike.
yep. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So just to show you while that's running, what I'll show you is just close some of these. So I'm back on. I'll close all these and I'll navigate from here just to show you. So if I click on application, and I just need to refresh this list. So click here on refresh list. And that's going to show me the new application that I created, Parts Unlimited. So click on that. And I can see here that the data that I associated with this application, the plans, repositories, and pipelines. So click on the pipelines and then click on the first one, the Parts Unlimited pipeline. And then that's showing me that one is being tracked and that it has 4 steps. So there is a build, test, validate, deploy precondition, and then deploy. So if you click on this pipeline UI view pipeline, you will see ServiceNow takes the data that's being pulled in from the pipeline and it builds a UI to show you what the pipeline actually looks like. I'll just wait for that to render. So you can see we run the pipeline once. So my pipeline history will be here on the left. Then I can see my build, test, validate steps here. I can also, if I had all the data, I don't have it yet, but I can see I've got my artifacts. I've got, if I had commits there, and if I had work items, it would show me. Similarly, test results and software scanning results are going to show up here. So this is not ServiceNow running the pipeline. This is just ServiceNow building a view of the pipeline that is running in ADO. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do, just jump back here and see how this is going. Okay, that pipeline is finished. So if I jump back here and just reload this form, I should see the second pipeline execution show up once it refreshes. So hopefully this is all making sense. And again, apologies for the performance of these instances. This should be a lot faster in your own instances. Okay. Let's jump into them again. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do next is on step 3 on page 14. So we're going to jump into, sorry, beg your pardon. We're going to go into the next step on page 15 to automate the change requests. Okay, now it's getting exciting. So we need to provide some details about what we want. So you can see here with these steps, I need to select a step where I want my change to be created. So these are not in the right order. So we'll have a build, and then we'll have a test, and then we'll have a precondition, and then we'll deploy. So what you want to do is you want to click on this deploy application precondition step. Okay. And we need to select type. We've got a choice of build and test deploy, etc. We want to make this a prod deploy. So select prod deploy, and make sure this change control box is ticked. And then you should see some other parts of the form be made visible. So we want to put in a configuration item here. And we're going to use, just trying to find out, we're going to use parts. Spell parts unlimited. And under change approval group, we want to put in application development as the group who's going to be pulled in for manual approval of the change. Change type you can leave as normal. And we're going to save this at this point. Okay, so that's saved. Now what you need to do is in step 4 on page 15, jump back into your pipeline. And we just need to go, I just need to move that. Just need to go back to one step to parts unlimited. So pipeline / parts unlimited. And then you should see the edit button over here on the top. Click on edit. Now, this is YAML. YAML is very finicky when it comes to indentation. So you can see here that you've got the different steps in this code and that they're indented. Indentation is meaningful in YAML. So just be careful about what you do next. Now, if you scroll right down near the bottom, so lines 72 to 76, you'll see those lines are commented out. And what you want to do is put your cursor right on the left-hand side and select down to line 76 so that you've got it selected like that, exactly as you see on the screen. Now, the hashes here are comments. So these steps have been commented out. The easiest way to uncomment this, if you're on a Mac, you hold down Command. I think on Windows, you hold the Windows key, if I'm not mistaken. and then hit the / key, and that will uncomment those steps. So Command / or Windows key / should uncomment like that. Now, before you save, what we need to do is we just need to make sure that we're pointing to our ServiceNow instance, our lab instance. So on between line 73 and 74, where you can see settings, just click on settings. And then over there on the right, you will see a ServiceNow endpoint. Just click the drop down and you'll be able to select your ServiceNow instance. So just make sure it's selected there. And we don't need to change anything else, do we? Let's have a look. Okay, and then make sure you click on the Add button at the bottom right. So what you should see in your YAML, in your pipeline, is you should see the connected service name has been saved as your ServiceNow instance there. Okay, if that is done, then click Save. And just make sure Commit directly to master branch is selected and click the Save button. Okay, now these pipelines have not been set up to trigger automatically. So what we're going to do next is we're going to change some code and then we're going to run the pipeline. So we're on step 7. So what we want to do is navigate to our repo. So over here on the left where it's got repos, hover over that and then click on Files. Once you're there, just click on the Parts Unlimited top folder. And you should see down here, there's a readme.md file. Just click on that file. This is just a README file. It's just text. It's not actual code, but we're just going to simulate a code commit. And once that is selected, click on Edit. And we will just add some blank lines to the file to stimulate a code update. And once you've done that, you can then click Commit. And we need to make sure we assign a work item to this change. So you can drop down the work items and just select anything you want, any work item you want. And once that's done, click Commit. Okay, so we've made a change. Now we're going to run the pipeline. So going back here to the rocket, click on Pipelines and then Pipelines. And then click on the Parts Unlimited pipeline and click on Run Pipeline. Okay, so what we're expecting to see this time is once the pipeline gets to the deploy stage, we should have a change record that gets created and the pipeline should pause. So we'll just let that run. And I'm going to pause there just to see, has everyone managed to keep up? Anyone stuck? Anyone have any issues?
Yeah, Gaurav mentioned one issue.
Mm-hmm.
Gaurav, he's stuck somewhere.
Yeah, I was following through pretty well, catching up, but when I got into the pipeline for Parts Unlimited, there was only one step listed for me, and that's called job. I didn't see the similar steps that you have in the view.
Okay, so when you edit your pipeline, you're not seeing all this code?
I don't even have that selected pipeline that I need to edit. I only get one single step in that Pass
Oh, I
Unlimited
see.
pipeline.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe so how this gets populated is that pre-work that was done where we copy from a public repo into your project. That's where this is coming from. So maybe something went wrong with that step and the repo, the code didn't get copied.
Mm-hmm. All right. That should be fixed if I re-import it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can re-import it. I think there's it's mentioned at the beginning of the lab guide that if the data in the repo doesn't get imported, it's got some steps that you can follow to manually import the data. So I'd recommend you follow those steps.
That sounds good. No worries. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. No worries. Anyone else? Is everyone else managing to stay with us? Okay, great. G2, anyone else?
No, I think we are good as of now. No active questions or
Okay,
no.
fabulous. That's
Interest.
great. All right. So you can follow the next steps in the workspace. I'm just going to show you another view which is not in the workspace. When it comes to looking at the changes, I'm not a big fan of what's in the workspace yet. It will improve over time, but I think the old view actually is slightly better. So that's what I'm going to show you next. Once it loads. How are we doing for time? We've still got 20 minutes. Okay, let's have a look. All right, so you can see here, our pipeline has paused. And on this ServiceNow step, it should have created a change request for us. And it's waiting for that change to be approved before it will allow the pipeline to continue. So let's go and have a look here. If I click on the filter navigator, type in pipeline, I can look at my pipeline executions. It's the same view that I showed you previously in the workspace. I'm just going to jump in here. And add a field. Okay, so let's have a look at our pipeline for Parts Unlimited. Now I'm going to click here on Pipeline UI. So again, I've got my history. I can see the previous 2 runs of my pipeline where I had those that data and those steps. Now I can see my build is completed, my testing is completed, and I've got a change that's been created. So let's have a look at that change. Now this is where you should start to see the power of this product. So this change has been created automatically from the pipeline and should be populated with the data that we're looking for from our DevOps tools. So if we scroll down here, we can see that I've got my work item that I associated. I've got my test summaries showing me my passing rate for the tests. If I was running SonarQube, I'd be able to see the SonarQube scan data here. I can see the commits associated with that and my artifact version. And a change policy has been applied here, the normal change policy. So this change is waiting for someone to approve it. I'm just going to go, and for some reason, these are duplicated in the lab. Don't know why. But we'll just go and approve this change manually. This. Okay, so let's see. Now the change has moved to implement state. You can see it was approved and it's moved to implement. If we jump back to our pipeline, that should, whoops, sorry, I went too far. Just going to move this out the way. We should see that event come through to ADO, and ADO should allow the pipeline to continue. Is taking a little bit of time because of how slow this instance is, but we should hopefully see that come through shortly. So again, the next step in the process would be to set up some approval policies to automate the change, and that will be the subject of the next workshop. So we are planning a series of these workshops. This is just the first in terms of getting started. So the idea is just to show customers how to use the workspace and how to connect a tool. And you've seen the first step in terms of triggering a change to be created from the pipeline. The next step is setting up the approval policies to automate the approval of the change and progress the change through the life cycle. So I can see this has started going through. It's gone through to review already, which is great. So now I'm able to review the change and I can manually close it once I'm comfortable with what happened. And I can, jumping back to ADO, I can see that my pipeline has now fully completed. So we had the speed, although not really fast in this instance, and we had the governance, and we had all the data that we needed actually captured as a single source of truth on our change record. So that is the end of the lab. Any questions on what we've seen today before we wrap up?
Mike, there's a question about what would have happened if you didn't approve the change, if it was rejected.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, great question. So what would happen if I had rejected the change? It would have gone back and cancelled. The pipeline would have failed, and the change would have been cancelled. So the pipeline would have not deployed. So what we can see when we look here, you can see the change request happens here, and then the deploy is happening afterwards. Now, this is not showing me the latest data, but if I had rejected the change here, this step, the deploy step, would not have happened. So it wouldn't have deployed. The pipeline would have stopped at that point. Any other questions? Okay, I'm just going to jump back to the slides just to wrap up and run another poll.
Yeah, so while you're bringing a poll, I think we're just 12 minutes away. Still,
Yeah.
when you want to ask questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type a question in the chat.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so what we showed you, very briefly how to connect a tool, create an application, get all that data, from your tools into ServiceNow, into DevOps, so that you're able to have visibility of that data. And then eventually, once you have your policies in place, you can fully automate your change. But typically customers have a journey that they go through, which is, crawl, walk, run when it comes to DevOps. So you don't have to jump straight through to change automation as your first step. You are able to, even if you just connect the tools and you get that data in, you can populate that insights dashboard. That already provides you a whole bunch of value because you've got visibility of the data and you can understand what's going on. You can then move through change traceability, where developers could, with just a few clicks, add that data to their changes, which are still being created automatically. And then the next step, which would be kind of the walk step, would be to trigger the change to happen automatically from the pipeline, but not necessarily stop it from being associated with the approval. And then the final one, which is, as we talked about, which is pause the pipeline, wait for approval, and then only if the change is approved do you continue. Okay, so I'm going to run a final poll, and that's just to get your view in terms of what happens next with what you've seen today. So let me launch that poll. So we're just asking you to choose what you're going to do next after you've seen what you've seen today. So what are your next steps? So please answer that. We've got about 30% answered, so keep going, guys. Put your answers in. I'm going to end the poll in about 10 seconds. Okay, thank you. So it looks like most people were here for information, which is good, but there's a few of you that want to deploy DevOps in subprod within a month and some within 3 months, which is fantastic. Okay, so yeah, we're very keen for customers to go ahead and deploy this. So if you do need any help or anything, just please reach out to your account team, reach out to us, and we'd be happy to help you. We will send out the slides and additional links to information as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. And finally, if there are any final questions, I'm happy to take people off mute and we can answer the questions live or post in the chat. Did people find that useful? Did it make sense? Did you get a sense of how straightforward it is? We basically in an hour we were able to connect to ADO and bring in all the data and have a change created. So that was all within an hour.
Mike, I just made everyone to allow to talk. So in case
Thank you,
someone
GT.
want to unmute yourself and
Feel free
feedback.
to ask verbally any questions, any comments, any suggestions for how we could do this better next time.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for the session. I did not join on time. I was quite late, but at least I grabbed something. So I wanted to ask, if you're doing this in a test environment, for example, and you want to do the same change in a prod environment, can that cause like some kind of ramification? What are some of the ramifications this can cause in a prod environment if you have done the change in a test environment or in a dev environment?
Okay, so typically what you would want to do is you would definitely want to set this up in a non-prod environment first. and set up the connections and set up the pipeline and get all the data in and set up your approval policies, etc., and have that working in non-prod first, and obviously do proper testing to make sure that it's all working properly and that everyone is comfortable with it before you do any deployment to production. So you would typically go through the same SDLC or management process that you would with any ServiceNow change, with any upgrade. You'd do it in a subprod instance first, and then you'd migrate those changes through to production after you've done the right testing to make sure it's all working.
Okay, so can it cause any kind of conflict or data loss?
It shouldn't cause any conflict or data loss. I'm not sure how you would get data loss, because all it's doing is it's importing data into ServiceNow, and then it's creating a change.
Okay.
So and then it's approving a change. So I can't see any scenario where that would cause data loss.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Christian, sorry, you had a point. Did you want to?
Yeah, I think the question of Mimi was about what if you do the sub production setup first, and then on the same environment you do also the connection to prod. If you have there any conflicts when you do this kind of connection from dev and prod, or sub prod and prod to the same ADO setup, for example.
Oh, okay.
And I might can answer that because I recently did it.
Yes,
not sub prod and prod, but I did like connect a PDI and then a vendor instance.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't saw any issues. What I did just to avoid issues, in one step, you mentioned where you can see the connections. So I simply deactivate the webhooks, I mean. So I simply went there and simply deactivated the webhooks to the PDI when I moved to the vendor instance.
I see.
So if you right click, then you can disable it. If you just want to move back and forth, you can simply disable the webhooks for now, for that one instance. You have to do it 6 times because I think it's 6 webhooks per instance that it generates.
Yes.
But this is how I, let's say, work around it, just to avoid the concern that Mimi was mentioning.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. So, Kiri or Stentor, did you have any comment on that in terms of having a mix of non-prod and prod connected to the same ADO? Do you have any comments on that?
I think you summed it up correctly, Mike. So there should not be any data loss because it's 2 different instances, right? One you have prod and sub-prod which connect to the same ADO. At the end of 3, we have different webhooks for individual instances, right? So you would keep getting the data, and you can also import the data as we just saw. So we won't see any data loss. Okay, great. No worries. And I can see Gaurav, you raised your hand. Did you want to ask something?
A question that I was anticipating, I could actually have some sort of a config merge and added as a manual step between those pipeline changes. Something that we may have to see, like there are different web applications as components for the main product, and each one of them may have different dependency configurations. Mm-hmm. So how can we set that out as a merge step before a precompile or pre-deploy?
Oh, okay. I think we'd have to have a look at that individual use case to understand it a bit more. But typically, I mean, if you look at what DevOps is trying to do generally, the philosophy is to have, small iterative changes that make that are simple, that are not too complex. That's really what you want to try and go for with your pipelines. If you've got pipelines that are quite complex and doing those sort of merges, I'm not sure if that's good practice. However, it's a valid thing if it's happening in your organization, but we can definitely have a look and maybe provide some recommendations once we understand the use case a bit better.
Yeah,
So please contact us with the details and we'll have a look.
Yeah, obviously, no, just had a thought there, and you actually went into there where you were editing the steps. So I thought I might throw that question in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. All right, we're almost at time. So any last final questions before we wrap up? Great. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Hopefully you got some real useful knowledge out of that, and look out for our future sessions. Thanks all. Bye.